everyone, it's Wobby back with another edition of the Pick 6 from 2018 Verizon Vikings training camp at TCO Performance Center, where it's raining, so Ryan and I have come inside. The guys, they stayed outside to work. Speaking of work, let's answer some of your questions. Here we go. Question number 1 comes from Chris in Seattle. What were the joint practices like for those of us who couldn't see them? How would you describe it? Well, Chris, there was an uptick in tempo and competitiveness for sure. Now, the Vikings and Jags have been practicing against each other for the last couple of weeks, and those practices have gone well, but there's no denying the intensity picks up a notch when you practice against another team. It was fun to watch, especially the offensive line and the defensive line. Question number 2 comes from Kyle. How was the offensive line against Jacksonville? That's what stirs my curiosity. Can't wait for week 1. Skol. Well, Kyle is right. These Jaguars had 55 sacks last season. That's why their nickname is Jacksonville. So they're a formidable challenge for the Vikings offensive line, and I thought our O-line held up pretty well over 2 days of practices. Now we get to see them do it in a game when the Vikes and Jags face one another on Saturday afternoon. Question number 3 comes from Jack in Florida. With Nick Easton on IR, who do you think will be lining up in front of Cousins on opening day? Well, can't wait to see how this shakes out. We still have yet to be decided on this position battle. We'll see how the interior of the offensive line shakes up once training camp comes to a conclusion. I think a few names to keep an eye on include Tom Compton, a free agent signing this offseason, as well as Avion Collins, who also plays tackle but has been training inside at guard during training camp. The next question comes from Marco. How has Andrew Sendejo looked in camp, and can we look forward to seeing him start with Harrison Smith at safety next year? Yeah, I think that's pretty safe to say. Sendejo has been a solid starter next to Harrison Smith on Mike Zimmer's defense for the last few seasons, and I anticipate that will continue. Sendejo missed most of the offseason program, but he's been back and looking good here at training camp. The next question comes from Michelle in Hawaii. What do we look for in Game 2 of the preseason? Well, what we want to see is an extension of what we saw in Denver in the first game. How good was the first team offense and the first team defense? We want to see more of that. But more importantly, here are the no-nos. No injuries, no penalties, no sacks allowed on offense, and no scores allowed on defense. If we can do that, we'll be in good shape. The final question comes from Jeff in California. Do you think the Vikings can fly under the radar early this season? How much does that matter? Well, actually, Jeff, it matters quite a bit. Coach Zimmer has to manage the team's psyche every single day, and what people think outside the building does have a bit of a factor on that. I don't think the Vikings can fly under the radar. This team was 13-3 last year, went to the NFC title game, added Kirk Cousins and Sheldon Richardson. A lot of talent on this team. The expectations are going to be high, but I think this team can handle that. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Pick 6. We'll be back next week with another edition, so make sure you send your questions in to the email address at the bottom of the screen. Also, in the meantime, remember the Vikings and Jaguars, they play preseason game number 2 this Saturday at noon. The game is on TV on Fox 9, and of course it'll be on the Vikings radio network. If you can't catch the game that way, there's another option. Go to Vikings.com/Game Pass. Start your free 7-day trial, and you can see Vikings games live and in on-demand format with the call of Vikings play-by-play guy Paul Allen, analyst Pete Burstich, and sideline analyst Greg Coleman and Ben Weber. Don't miss it.